Picture this. It's Sunday night and you're sitting at your kitchen table with your laptop open and a cup of coffee that's gone cold because you've been staring at the same spreadsheet for 40 minutes. You make decent money, not rich money, but decent money. You have a job with benefits, you have a car that runs, you have an apartment or maybe even a house. You don't blow money on stupid things. You packed your lunch 4 days this week. You skipped the vacation you wanted because it didn't feel responsible. You're doing everything they told you to do. And yet somehow at the end of every month, the number in your account looks basically the same as it did the month before, maybe a little worse. And you sit there wondering what you're missing, what the people pulling ahead of you know that you don't, whether you're just not working hard enough or smart enough, or whether something is genuinely broken. Here's what I want to tell you before anything else. Nothing is wrong with you. You're not bad at math, you're not lazy, you're not failing at some test that everyone else is quietly passing. You are running a race where someone moved to the finish line and forgot to tell you. There are 4 specific forces working against the middle class right now. Most people identify one of them if they're lucky. Almost nobody sees all 4 operating at the same time. And until you can name all 4, you cannot fight any of them. That's what this video is about. My name is Zubi, and I spend a genuinely unreasonable amount of time thinking about why hardworking people with decent incomes keep ending up in the same place financially no matter how much effort they put in. If you're someone who wants to understand what's actually happening to your money instead of just feeling vaguely cheated by it, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up helping you see the pattern clearly. Now, before we get into the 4 forces, I want to introduce you to a household. Let's call them the Malik family. 2 working adults, combined income of around $95,000 a year. They have 1 kid, they rent a 2-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city, they have a car payment, they have student loans, they have a credit card they pay off most months, they cook at home most nights, they don't take expensive vacations, they have about $4,000 in savings, and they've had about $4,000 in savings for 3 years running. By every cultural measure, the Maliks are doing fine. By every financial measure, they are standing completely still, and they have no idea why. Keep them in mind, because by the end of this video, you're going to be able to explain their situation better than any financial advisor they've ever spoken to. Let's start with force number 1. Force number 1, the inflation trap. When most people hear the word inflation, they picture the price of eggs going up. And yes, that's part of it, but that's the small part, the version that shows up on grocery receipts and makes people angry for a week, and then gets absorbed into the background noise of life. The inflation that's actually destroying middle-class wealth is quieter, it's slower, and it operates in the 3 specific categories that matter most to how a middle-class life actually gets built: housing, healthcare, education. These 3 things are not optional. You cannot opt out of needing somewhere to live. You cannot opt out of eventually needing medical care. And in the economy we built, you largely cannot opt out of needing a degree to access a middle-class income in the first place. They are the 3 pillars of a stable life. And all 3 of them have inflated at rates that make general inflation look like a rounding error. Let's look at housing first, because the numbers are genuinely hard to look at. In 1990, the median home price in America was around $120,000. Median household income was around $30,000. That ratio is a 4-to-1 ratio. The house cost 4 times what the household made in a year. Painful, but workable. Today, the median home price sits around $420,000. Median household income is around $84,000. That ratio is now 5-to-1 and climbing. And in major metros, that ratio is closer to 8 or 10-to-1. But here's the part that really stings. Wages over that same period grew roughly 180%. Home prices grew roughly 400%. The gap didn't stay the same, it widened. Every year the Maliks saved toward a down payment, the down payment got larger in absolute terms. Not because they were slow, because the target was accelerating away from them. Healthcare tells a similar story. Since 2000, healthcare costs have risen at roughly 3 times the rate of general inflation. The average employer-sponsored family health plan now costs over $23,000 per year in total premiums. The employee's share of that has grown faster than wages every single year for 2 decades. And education. The average cost of a 4-year college degree has increased by over 180% since 1980, adjusted for inflation. The credential required to access the income required to afford the house required to build the wealth has itself become a wealth-destroying instrument before the career even starts. The Maliks are not imagining this. The 3 pillars of a middle-class life have become structurally more expensive relative to income. The advice that worked for the previous generation was written when those ratios were different. Nobody updated the manual. That's force number 1, and it would be enough on its own to explain why things feel harder, but it's only the beginning. Force number 2, the savings punishment. Quick honesty check here. How much of your savings is sitting in a regular savings account right now? Not invested, not in a retirement account, just sitting in a bank account earning whatever your bank decided to give you. Hold that number in your head. Here is what that money is actually doing. The national average savings account interest rate sits around 0.5%. Inflation over the last several years has averaged well above that, which means in real terms, money sitting in a savings account is not holding its value. It is slowly losing purchasing power every single month. Your balance goes up by a few cents. Your buying power goes down by more than that. The middle class was taught to save. Save for a rainy day. Build an emergency fund. Keep 3 to 6 months of expenses in savings. This is responsible advice. It is not wealth-building advice. And somewhere along the way, those two things got confused. Let me show you what I mean with 2 people. Same income, same starting point of $10,000, same 20-year window. Person A puts their money in a savings account earning 0.5%. After 20 years, they have about $11,050. Person B invests in a basic index fund earning a historical average of around 7% annually. After 20 years, they have just under $38,700. Same money, same 20 years. One person has $11,000, the other has nearly $39,000. The only difference is where the money sat. Now, here's the part that makes this a trap rather than just a missed opportunity. The middle class largely knows investing exists. They're not unaware that the stock market exists, but they keep their money in savings for a reason that feels completely rational: safety. The stock market feels risky, the savings account feels responsible. And after watching 2008 or 2022 from the sidelines, that instinct gets reinforced every few years. But here's what nobody explains clearly enough. The risk of investing is visible. It shows up in red numbers on a screen during bad years, and it feels terrible. The risk of not investing is invisible. It doesn't show up on any screen. It just quietly erodes your purchasing power year after year while your balance politely increases by 17 cents a month. The Maliks have $4,000 in savings. It has been $4,000 for 3 years. In nominal terms, they have broken even. In real terms, they have lost ground. The bank is not on their side in this transaction. The bank is using their money to generate returns it will not share with them. That's force number 2, and this one is personal because it was sold to the middle class as virtue. Force number 3, the lifestyle inflation trap. This one is the hardest to talk about because unlike the first 2 forces, this one lives inside the decisions people make. Not because they're irresponsible, because they're human. Here's how it works. You get a raise, 4%, maybe 5%. It feels meaningful. You worked hard for it. And almost immediately, without any dramatic decision being made, your life gets a little more expensive. You upgrade the streaming plan. You start ordering delivery more nights. You say yes to the weekend trip you'd been putting off. The car lease comes up for renewal, and this time you go 1 trim level higher because you can. None of these are reckless decisions. None of them feel like mistakes. They feel like the reward for the effort that produced the raise in the first place. But here's what actually happened mathematically. Before the raise, the gap between what you earned and what you spent was the engine of your wealth building. The raise was an opportunity to widen that gap. Instead, the gap stayed exactly the same because spending rose to meet income almost automatically. Researchers call this the hedonic treadmill. Your brain adapts to every new level of comfort within about a year, and then that level becomes the new baseline. The upgrade stops feeling like an upgrade, it just becomes normal. And normal requires maintenance, and maintenance costs money that could have been compounding. Let's put actual numbers on this. Say the Maliks get a combined raise of $5,000 this year. That's roughly $310 extra per month after taxes. If they held their spending flat and invested that $310 every month for 20 years at 7%, they'd have an additional $194,000, nearly $200,000 from 1 year's raise held flat for 2 decades. Instead, they let spending drift up naturally. The $310 gets absorbed. Net change to their wealth-building capacity? Zero. They got a raise and ended up in exactly the same financial position relative to where they want to be. This is not a character flaw. This is the default setting of being human in a consumer economy that is extraordinarily good at finding your extra money before you've decided what to do with it. Every subscription service, every car dealer, every apartment complex with updated finishes knows that income rises happen. They price themselves to capture the next tier of your budget the moment it becomes available. The only defense against force number 3 is intentionality, deciding in advance what happens to a raise before the raise arrives, automating the gap before lifestyle has a chance to fill it. Simple in theory, genuinely difficult in practice, and almost nobody talks about it directly. Here is something worth sitting with for a moment. The middle class is the most efficiently monetized demographic in the entire economy. Not the poor, who don't have enough money to extract, not the wealthy, who have enough leverage to negotiate. The middle class. People with stable incomes, reasonable credit scores, and a cultural script that tells them debt is a normal tool for building a life. Think about how a middle-class life gets assembled. You need a degree to get the job. The degree requires a loan. You get the job, you need a car to get to the job. The car requires a payment. You want to build equity? You buy a house. The house requires a mortgage. Along the way, there's a medical bill that didn't get fully covered. There's a credit card for the months when the timing doesn't work out perfectly. Each individual debt made sense at the time it was taken on. But here's what the architecture looks like from the outside. The average American with a bachelor's degree carries around $37,000 in student loan debt. Average monthly payment around $400. The average car payment in America right now sits at over $730 per month for a new vehicle. The average mortgage payment has crossed $2,000 per month. Add minimum credit card payments, and the average middle-class household is sending somewhere between $3,500 and $4,500 a month to creditors before they've paid for food, utilities, insurance, or childcare. On a $95,000 income, that's roughly $7,900 per month gross, or around $5,800 take-home after taxes. If $3,500 to $4,500 of that is flowing directly to debt service, you already understand why the Maliks have had $4,000 in savings for 3 years running. There is simply no room. And here's the part that makes this architectural rather than accidental. Every one of those debt products was marketed to the middle class as a tool for building the life they wanted. The student loan was an investment in their future. The car payment was for a reliable vehicle that gets them to work. The mortgage was building equity. Each debt was presented as a smart decision, and in isolation, many of them were. The problem is what they look like assembled together, month after month, year after year, quietly siphoning the capital that could have been compounding. The wealthy borrow differently. They borrow against assets to buy more assets. Their debt works for them. The middle class borrows against future income to buy things that depreciate. Their debt works against them. Same financial instrument, completely opposite outcomes depending on what you're borrowing for and what it costs relative to what it produces. The cruel irony. Now, here's the part that I think explains why this feels uniquely frustrating. Every single one of these 4 forces hit hardest on people who followed the rules. The inflation trap hits hardest on people who are actually trying to buy homes and get degrees and access healthcare. People who opted out of those things are, in a dark irony, more insulated from those particular cost explosions.
The savings punishment hits hardest on people who were responsible enough to save in the first place. If you never saved anything, there's nothing sitting in an account losing real value. The lifestyle inflation trap hits people who earned raises. You have to be doing well enough to get ahead before lifestyle inflation can pull you back. And the debt architecture hits hardest on people who pursued the credentials and the assets that the middle-class path requires. The very milestones used to define financial responsibility, the degree, the car, the house, became the mechanism of financial stagnation. This is not bad luck. This is not a coincidence. The middle class followed a set of instructions that were written for an economy with different price ratios, different wage growth, different interest rates, and different debt levels than the one that actually exists today. And nobody formally updated the instructions. Your parents probably bought their house at 3 times their annual income, sent their kids to a college that cost a fraction of what it costs now, had a car payment that represented a much smaller share of their monthly take-home. The advice they gave you was not wrong for the world they lived in. It just doesn't map on to the world you're actually navigating.
What actually breaks the pattern? I want to be honest with you here, because this is the part where a lot of videos give you a list of hacks and send you on your way. Cut the subscriptions, make your coffee at home, start a side hustle. And look, none of that is wrong exactly, but it's also not the answer. You cannot budget your way out of 4 structural forces operating simultaneously against you. That's not a math problem with a budgeting solution. The actual lever is this: the gap between what you earn and what you spend held open long enough and wide enough for compounding to do its work. That's it. That is the entire mechanism. Simple to say, genuinely difficult to execute against 4 forces specifically designed to close that gap as fast as it opens. But it's the only thing that works, and it works reliably when it actually happens. The Maliks don't need a new income stream. They need $500 a month that doesn't get eaten by Force 3 before it reaches an investment account. At 7% over 25 years, that $500 a month becomes just under $400,000. They don't need to defeat all 4 forces. They need to create enough space inside them for compounding to begin, because once it begins, the math starts shifting in their favor for the first time. Force 1 is largely outside their control. Housing and healthcare costs are systemic, but they can choose a market, a housing type, a career trajectory that minimizes the damage. Force 2, they can fix this week. Moving uninvested savings beyond the emergency fund into low-cost index funds is not complicated. It is uncomfortable because it feels riskier than a savings account, but as we covered, the real risk runs the other direction. Force 3 requires intentionality before the money arrives. Automating investments so the gap gets funded before lifestyle sees the income is the closest thing to a cheat code this whole game has. Force 4 is the slowest to fix and the most important to stop making worse. Every new debt product is a new claim on future income. Every claim on future income is a reduction in the gap that compounding needs to work. None of this is easy. All of it is possible, and all of it starts with being able to name the 4 forces clearly enough to stop blaming yourself for their effects. Remember the Maliks at that kitchen table on Sunday night staring at the spreadsheet that doesn't add up? Here's what I want them to understand. They are not behind because they worked less hard. They are not behind because they made catastrophically bad decisions. They are behind because 4 forces that nobody formally explained to them have been operating against their financial position simultaneously for years, and the cultural script they were handed told them that working harder and being more responsible was the answer to a problem that hard work and responsibility alone cannot solve. Knowing this changes things, not because knowledge magically fixes the math, but because the first step to fighting something is being able to see it clearly enough to fight it. You cannot build a strategy around a problem you've been taught to blame on yourself. The middle class is not failing. The middle class is navigating a genuinely harder set of conditions than the generation that wrote its playbook. And the people who break through are not the ones who worked hardest. They're the ones who updated the instructions. That's what you're doing right now, and that is not a small thing. If this helped you name something you've been feeling for a while, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me which of the four forces has hit you hardest. I actually read every single one. And if you want to know why $100,000 in savings feels completely different from $10,000, I made a full video on exactly that, and it's on your screen right now. I'll see you in that one.